Good morning. First of all, thanks very much for those of you who watched and provided feedback on my first video. I've posted one video and I've already got my first YouTube hater, so thank you very much for that. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the A2A protocol and how we can coordinate work across many different agents. And first, a little bit of context. So throughout my work, I spend a lot of time talking to technologists, solutions architects, CTOs who have visions of how they are going to transform their company by having this army of agents that all automatically talk to each other and coordinate work, and almost like a microservices architecture of agents reporting into each other. And the question of how we coordinate work between those agents, how does an agent interact with another agent, and how does a human interact with these agents, how do we keep track of the work that's being done between these agents, is an area that's evolving right now. And I've heard a lot of talk about this A2A protocol, and I wanted to just talk about it briefly today. I think it was about a year ago, Google have led this effort and released this first version of this A2A protocol. Recently they announced 1.0, and the idea of it is it provides a protocol for communication between agents where they can request work of another agent, they can check in on the status of a job, that sort of stuff, and it allows the agent to keep control of all of the things that are inside its own boundary and still be able to have dependencies of work that's going on elsewhere. Sounds really good in practice, but there's another model that's also evolving right now for coordination of work between multiple agents, and that is this concept of a central ledger of work. So the idea here is that instead of having agents maintain their own tracking, effectively they're tracking notes of all the tasks that are going on across the organization, that instead you have a centralized issue management system. And this may be quite easy to understand because we already use systems like this as humans today. So if you think about things like GitHub issues, or you think about shared task lists of any form, you know, we have Linear, we have Asana, we have Notion, we have all sorts of systems already that help us to track tasks centrally. That's our ledger of work for what's going on in our organization. And so these two approaches, actually the A2A approach of peer-to-peer work management also appears in organizations when humans on an ad hoc basis go to another human with a message or a request and they ask for work to be done. So that could be an email, it could be a message on an instant messaging platform like Slack or Teams. And I think as humans, the way we manage work, we are given quite a lot of agency to determine the way that we work, the way that we track the action items that we're working on. And so typically in an organization, unless they have gone all out and implemented something like Asana to manage work at the organizational level, you tend to find that everyone's tracking their action items and to-dos in different ways. And it's extremely inefficient because there's no way to easily look up what the current state of work is. You end up posting status updates in all different places. It's hard to find information. And that's when you start needing, you know, enterprise-wide search tools to be able to figure out what the hell is going on with everything. So we translate this into the agent world. You have A2A, where you have agents individually tracking what's going on with the work that they are aware of. And then we have the idea of a centralized work ledger. And there's several of these starting to emerge that are agent native, but equally I think you could see established players like Asana, Linear, GitHub issues could all become players for what will be, I think, a much more important piece of the enterprise architecture going forward, and more people will be adopting these centralized ledgers of work. So we have these sort of two competing models, and when is one good and when is the other? Well, this is my personal view. It's that if you're doing work inside a company where you have control over the way that it is tracked, the way that it is done, then I think the centralized ledger makes a lot more sense. It allows you to debug things. It allows you to see at any point what's going on with work. You can go to one central place and see you know, what the status of any job is and what the history of it is, see where things went wrong. Does mean that you've got a central point of infrastructure that you're now dependent on, but I think in organizations, centralization of control is pretty standard, and I don't think that will be too laborious for organizations to be able to manage, and I think the benefits will far outweigh that. So where does that leave our A2A protocol? Well, the reason I'm making this video is because I've had a couple of conversations recently where people have been really wanting to go all in on this A2A protocol, and I want to just highlight a couple of examples, one good, one bad. So I was at AWS Summit last week, and I had a conversation with somebody who had built a multi-agent solution to a problem, very innovative, great solution, and they were using A2A to coordinate the work between the agents. But the work was all being done inside one organization. So they'd chosen this A2A protocol to send messages between the agents, but then they're going to have all sorts of problems with, you know, they pay a price in the overhead of debugging and being able to figure out what the status of the work is and all that sort of stuff, because it's now decentralized in lots of different places. And when it's inside an organization, there's really no need to pay that extra overhead because you're not really getting any benefit from decentralizing things. There's another example which was a much better use case for it. I talked to a chief data officer at a telecommunications company a few months ago, and they had built an agent-to-agent communications solution between two agents where they crossed organizational boundaries. So there was one agent in their company, one agent in another company, and these agents were coordinating work between the two of them. And that is a use case that I can get on board with. That's somewhere where you want to maintain your opacity, right? You don't necessarily want to allow the other organization to see everything about how you're organizing your work. You know, you want to have some sort of boundary and control. And also the idea of having a central ledger in that case, the question always becomes, well, who's going to own the ledger? Which organization? Is it organization A or is it organization B? Or do they end up both keeping their own separate ledgers, and now you don't have a single source of truth, which is what happens in a lot of human-to-human collaborations across organizations. So the peer-to-peer model definitely works better there. So where is all this going? To sum up, I think A2A is really interesting, and it's definitely a protocol that we need. But I think right now, engineers are still a little confused about where is the best place to apply it. It's also not helped by the fact that there is so much diversity out there of choice when it comes to these central ledgers. There is not a single system or protocol for that yet. I doubt that there ever will be, to be honest, because there's too many different companies competing in this space. But I think for companies that have not yet adopted a system like Jira or in fact, most software development organizations will already have a system like this, a Jira or a Linear or something like that. But in broader knowledge work, it's much fewer and further between. I think we're going to see that expand for knowledge work. I think we're going to see more centralized ledgers of work so that humans and agents can collaborate with each other and see the central status of what's going on with work. So it's very much an evolving space, but this is an area that's really not talked about very much because, well, I'm not sure why actually, but it's definitely something that is going to be a core piece of infrastructure that most organizations are going to need if they're going to be able to harness the power of multiple agent architectures. And if you're really interested in this, there's some interesting open source projects that I've been playing around with that show you a little bit about what the future of work might look like in these scenarios. One that's really fun to have a play around with is Paperclip. If you want to check that out, it's definitely very early stage. I don't think you can use it for any kind of major production work just yet. It's still sort of figuring out what it is and what value it will provide. But there's Paperclip. There's also a fantastic software development, what do you call it? Not a platform, software development, let's just call it a system. I mean, I will get shooed for that, but we'll just call it a system. And it's called Gas City, and it's built by it was originally ideated by Steve Yegge, who you may know from a very famous Google article many years ago. You can go research that for yourself, Yegge. But yeah, check out Gas City. It's really interesting. Designed for coding, designed for mass coordination of work across hundreds of coding agents, many projects all at the same time. And I've been playing around with that as well, and it's pretty cool, the pace at which you can coordinate and get work done, and that all relies on a central ledger. So if you're interested in these things, check out those projects. As I say, I don't think anyone has really solved this problem just yet, but it's definitely a really interesting area to focus on, and love to hear what you think.